There are many people out there who think of calmness as a destination. They feel like, hey, they're not calm at all right now, and maybe at some point in the future, at some time, in some place, they might find calmness. But what if the calmness isn't there or here, but rather on the way? Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Center of Calmness. Today, we are super blessed to have Holly Buchanan and Angie Grierson with us today. And I would introduce them and what they do, but I'd rather they do so. And really, just in the context of what has been a very glorious conversation that we've had over the last hour, as well as over the last few weeks, as we've been discussing a lot of elements of the journey. Welcome, Holly, and welcome, Angie.
Thanks, DK.
Thank you.
So we were talking about some elements, particularly, Angie, of your journey and what you have, kind of the crossroads that you've come to. I wonder if you might just share a couple of epiphanies. You were mentioning a lot of different tools, tips, techniques that you've been able to accumulate over the years, and something you mentioned as you called the marinade. I wonder if you might start our conversation again by sharing a bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I work as an early childhood educator in a school board where I live, and just in the last couple of months, I've taken some workshops that have really opened my eyes to more things that are out there that are speaking to me and calling me to maybe change some direction in my life.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see that, I mean, you're kind of coming from a very stable educational background, and you're in your element, right? You're just kind of doing your thing and enjoying a great stable set of relationships, and then, as we were discussing earlier, a great group of friends and a lot of deep connections. But yet, there's more out there, and that's really interesting. I wonder if you might share just a bit more.
Yeah, so I've been working at the school board for 8 years, I believe, and I was happy. I love my job. I wasn't really even looking for more, but I've had some life changes in the last handful of months, and they've given me the opportunity to kind of focus on myself more. And I took an Unwind Your Mind retreat at the beginning of March. And it's kind of just really, the ball just started rolling there, and things that I never even thought that would possibly happen just started finding me and knocking at my doorstep. So just talking about helping people through deep connection, conversation, and personal growth and tools that help to calm when you're stressed or in any kind of situations that you find yourself in where you're unsettled or overwhelmed or just not feeling at your best. And even though for a really long time, I've just kind of thought yeah, my life is good. Everything's good and settled. I think that just some life changes happen, and I'm in a space right now where I'm questioning everything, work-wise or personal life-wise. So like you said, DK, I have a fantastic group of girlfriends that I can depend on. They're like a free therapy session every time we have a girls' night.
Right.
We laugh, we cry, we tell our deepest, darkest secrets, and I couldn't ask for anything better than that. I have a solid family. There's so many things I wouldn't want to change, but I feel like I'm just realizing that there's so much more out there that I never even was beyond my imagination or my wildest dreams. So I was having a business meeting today with, do I say a name or no?
You can if you wish. It's completely up to you.
Okay, so her name is Felicia Searcy, and she's talking about finding your passion and your dream and following that. And so when I kind of like was talking to her about like all the stuff that's going on in my life and these things that I'm finding exciting and where do I go from here and what do I do with my life? And she said, I think that you're in the marinating stage, which just means like, you know, she's like, you have like a buffet in front of you and you're just sampling all the different things that are out there and available and testing things out. And so you're just kind of like soaking in all that goodness and waiting for things to kind of settle. And I like, DK, when you said you're like a kid in a room full of blocks. There's like all of these things are there. We just have to know how to realize and learn how to like build them all together. So I'm just learning that with using all my techniques and all of the great ideas and all the things that I've learned over the years with courses that I've taken and workshops and all that stuff. There's all this knowledge there, and I'm excited to share it, but I just have to figure out what the best way of getting it out to the world is. So does that answer your question?
100%. Yeah. And I'll just share a little bit about my own journey as well, because I was going through, and I really have a heavy corporate background, right? And in corporate, I like to think of it as a programmatic, right? You land in the environment and you learn the rules and tricks of the trade, and you learn kind of who you can count on, perhaps who you can't, what the political circuitry is that you need to operate within, and then you try to get the job done as best you can, right? But that programming comes at a cost. You lose creativity, you lose a lot of forward momentum, right? I could go on and on as how inefficient that process really is, right? And I'm sure that both of you are familiar with aspects of that. But for me, I hit a crossroads recently where I needed to grow as well, right? Like Angie, you're mentioning that, you know, everything's good, but somehow there's something missing. That was where I felt as well. For me, I thought I just needed to become a sales gunslinger, right? That was my thing. I needed to be able to drop in and just close deals like it was just like drawing and shooting a six gun pistol, right, or something like that. And I realized that there was so much more to it than that, right? Because I went out and I got my habit is to get the best training I can get, right? So when I saw a training on platform closing, I thought, well, shoot, if I can, Holly's very familiar with this, right? Doing a lot of work in corporate training and so on and so forth from the platform, right? In front of hundreds, maybe even thousands. And I thought, well, if I could get into a group like that and actually convince them all to head, or at least even most of them to head the same direction, that's my thing, right? But when I got into that arena, I realized that there was so much more that I needed to develop personally, and I needed to go through that stage, Angie, that you're talking about now, right? Which is what are the building blocks? What do I really have to offer? And so what I thought was going to be a skill became a journey, right? It became a process, and really out of that came the Center of Calmness, right? So I'm happy and so excited to have found kind of a waypoint, but really this is all just beginning, and I'm still in the playroom as well, right? Looking at all the building blocks I've got to work with and making combinations and figuring out what's all good. So, and now Holly actually has shared some of her story as well. And Holly, I wonder if you might take us through just a brief tour of your financial corporate type training and the kind of the before and then the after, and what you're working on and focusing and sharing with the world these days.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I think the three of us really come together because we all are in kind of that waypoint. We're at a junction in our journey. So yes, my background is public speaking, corporate training, working with professionals mainly on how to win trust and credibility. A lot of like financial advisors, anyone who really has a profession that high trust is just critical to your success. So one of my pivot is actually my new most hated word, because everybody's like, oh, well, just pivot. And I'm like, I tried to pivot and I like skidded and slid completely off the road and flipped over 5 times and I landed in a ditch. So that was kind of my version of pivot. But the new content that I'm working on is around conflict management. And again, I think what the three of us kind of converge on is, what do you do when you're emotionally triggered? Like, how can you stay calm and centered, especially if you're in a situation where it's a conflict and you're getting angry and your body is working against you, your amygdala gets triggered, your prefrontal cortex is literally not even working. That's that thinking center is taken over by the fight or flight center. So what I'm working on people with and myself, like it is my own journey, is I was a lifelong conflict avoider. And I am actually working on mastering conflict, like moving directly and honestly and having those really tough conversations.
Leaning into it.
And yeah, leaning into it. Absolutely. And it's all based on a system based on Aikido, which is a Japanese martial art. It's different from other martial arts, and it's all about how do you initially go with your opponent, going with their momentum in order to then take control and diffuse the attack with no one getting hurt. So you can see as a martial art how well it equates and those techniques work for verbal conflicts.
Super neat. And how do you see that evolving into what your life's journey might have for you in the future, Holly, if I could ask? You've kind of come from the more, if I could sum it up somewhat, right, and I probably won't do nearly as good a job, but the more traditional kind of training, discover your strengths, discover how to reach out in a more linear fashion to an audience, to market to them approach, right? And now you're talking about you're in the mix, right? And we're going to get to the subject of connection in a second here. So you're talking about a negative connection and actually transforming that somewhat to a positive connection.
Exactly. Because conflicts are opportunities. They can cause division, but they can absolutely, on the other side of conflict is connection. You can actually create really deep connections. Because think about it, in the customer service industry, they will tell you a customer who has a problem and that problem is successfully resolved will be more loyal than the customer who didn't have a problem. So the same thing, if you can actually have that conflict, move into it, work together through it, your relationship will be stronger at the end of that process.
So I think a natural question that would come up, especially from us corporate types out there, is that in order to go along with, even for a moment, don't I lose something in the process of giving the opponent that space?
Now, it's a perfect question, because people say, well, that feels like surrender, right? And I'm like, oh, it's the opposite of surrender. But because think about it, if we push against, and that's our gut reaction, you're pushing against me, I'm going to push against you. And now it's just resistance. So initially going with allows you to take control. So that's the main thing to keep in mind. Like DK, I don't know if you can talk about your example or not, but basically if you feel like someone is attacking you, you center yourself first so that you can mindfully respond instead of mindlessly react. When you mindlessly react, the other person is in control. So when you can get centered first, you're in control. And depending on how you enter, like enter well, and you can take control, enter poorly, and it's going to be really hard to recover. But you enter by just asking a clarifying question. You're not pushing against, but you're not retreating. You're not rolling over. You're just asking, do you want to share? Actually, let me do it this way. Do you want to share your example, DK? We talked about it at work, at your work.
I would, yeah. I'll sanitize it just a little bit. But yeah, essentially what it was a hallway conversation, and it was in front of another work group that I didn't work with often, but I worked with enough that they knew me, right? And it was basically the equivalent of a direct insult. It was an insult to competence that I was having to respond to. So that's something that that hits me pretty personal, right? Because I am working 110% all the time. So that is I process it like a lie, right? That person is actually speaking a lie to my face, right? In a way that's designed to be offensive, and in my opinion, also designed to drive me to a reaction, right? So that's where I was asking for your advice as to how to deal with that in an effective way. without losing face, right? And which was one of my bigger concerns as well.
Yeah, because a big reason conflicts escalate is because we feel like we're losing respect, and and losing space. It's a big reason why it escalates. And so, one of my recommendations is absolutely like center yourself first, and that's why DK, you and I share a lot of love of the calming, centering techniques.
Yes.
Because they say things like, "Well, just don't take it personally," and I'm like, did you hear what they just said? Of course I'm taking it personally. Like that's not helpful advice. So part of it is just, in your head saying, is that true? But it's saying, you know what, I'm not going to let them control me. They're trying to get a reaction out of me. I'm not going to let them do that. So let me fill in a little bit and kind of melt your situation with another. But let's say someone comes in and you're at work in a meeting and the person above you says something to the effect of, well, I just don't have any faith that this project is going to get done on time. And you're the one in charge of the project, and you're like, did you just diss me in front of my entire team, right? And then you want to like push against them. So how do you enter? You do your calming technique first. And then you can enter by saying, so what's most important to you about this project? So you're not backing off. You're not like, what do you mean? I can't believe you just said that. You're not attacking them. Like, if this is your boss, you can't say, well, F you. You can't do that. So by just calmly asking what's most important about this project, and then they can share information, and you can like that it gets done on time. Okay, so let's talk about that. So you're responding and you're engaging, but you're not pushing against and fighting, and you're also not retreating.
That's very cool. So I see that, right? It's almost like a change of venue where you step onto their ground instead of defending your own so much, or defending your own so-called reputation, and actually bringing in more soldiers, if you will, to the battle and starting the fight, but rather just letting it flow by and coming around to their side. That's pretty cool. I
think everyone could learn to use that, Holly. I think that would be very beneficial if the whole world knew Aikido. What did you call it? Verbal Aikido?
Yeah, it's like,
I think the world would be a better.
It's based on the philosophy of Aikido, yes.
Right.
And that's my mission, is the whole world should know about this. And that's why I'm out training it. I'm on stages. I was on stages live. Now I'm on the virtual stages, actually teaching, here's some martial art technique. Like someone throws a punch. So instead of like block, counter punch, well, you're the problem. And you want to go, how can you say that? Justify. You know what? You're the problem. So instead of the block counter punch, when they throw that punch, you just grab their arm and just continue in the same direction. And then they're like this. They're off balance. Like they didn't see it coming.
And then you're
like my favorite example is the bully who's like, you run like a girl. And Mia Hamm was famous for saying, and if you ran a little faster, you could too. Right? So she just grabbed it and they're like, oh, didn't see that coming.
That's pretty cool. And once you've made that move, I sense that it's a lot harder for the opponent to really come back on you. They have to expend a lot of energy to turn that back around and renew the attack, at least to the same impact as before. That's pretty cool. Yeah,
because if they're looking for a fight, you don't give them one. Like the other example I shared was speaking at a conference, and I speak to a lot of financial advisors, and there was a guy in the audience, and he said, I have a question. Are you a financial advisor? And I said, no, I am not. He said, so why should we listen to what you have to say? And he was trying to diss me, right? And so I could have gotten flustered and been like, well, I've got all this experience, and I've done all this proprietary research, and like I could have gotten flustered, or I could have attacked him back, which is never a good idea as a speaker. Highly recommend, do not make your audience members wrong.
Rule number one.
Not be invited back. But so he's like, so why should we listen to you? And I said, I'm glad you asked that question. I said, I am not a financial advisor. I said, you all are the experts of what it looks like from your side of the desk. My expertise is what it looks like from the client side of the desk. I spend all my time with your clients, and they are telling me things they're not telling you. So when I said, I'm glad you asked that question. I mean, I went with it, no resistance. I'm glad you asked that question, and you did. And his face was like, didn't see that coming. But right. he was like, he didn't know how to respond, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I also did not make him wrong. I basically agreed with him, like, yeah, you guys are right. You're the experts of what it looks like from your side of the desk. Like, I basically agreed with him. So it's just like, after, at the end of the conference, he walks up to me, like the reception area, he comes up and he's like, he says, I want to buy you a drink. And we had like a great conversation. Mm-hmm. He was like, it was awesome. So you could save face, let them save face. Really important point. But yeah, so these techniques, because think about it. To your point, do you feel weak? Would I have looked weaker if I had attacked him back? Or with what I did, like I looked stronger by taking that very secure approach to him. Like I was calm, centered. When you take that approach, you actually look stronger than you would if you had a reaction and fought back.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Super cool. Yeah. And the way I see it from this side, just listening to this, is that you're actually applying the same energy as a counterpunch would involve, but because you apply it after you're already alongside of him and you're applying it in the same direction as he's moving, he cannot recover. And it's not that you're not providing energy, it's not that you're being totally passive, right? And just letting him fly by, but you actually are putting energy in, saying, I know your clients, right? I know what they know, right? And I know something that maybe you don't know, and you might want to pay attention. But in a respectful way, that's much more effective. Absolutely.
Yeah, because there are respectful ways to handle it. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And you're more likely to get. And like, look, if this is someone you have to continue to work with at the workplace, someone you have to have an ongoing relationship with, even more important to make it respectful. Yeah.
Right.
You're respect that way.
Yeah. And either way, you're stuck with the other individual anyway, right? So it's a good way to make the best of it and avoid future conflict in the future. Super awesome. Angie, I'm just curious, in your educational environment, do you ever run into anything quite like this? Are folks butting heads at all in the educational world?
You know what? There are people, I'll say, who do butt heads. I try and stay out of it. I try and stay out of like gossip or complaining or negativity, or because it just brings you down and it doesn't make your day any better. So there have been times that I've said like, hey, that's the person that I work with. Like, can we not talk about that? Or, it makes me feel a little uncomfortable to talk about that behind somebody's back. There are a lot of times that like when there's somebody just talking negatively or whatever, I'll just walk away, and they're not going to complain to me much when they complain to me. I don't play back, right? Because they want somebody to feed into their excitement about negativity, because for some reason some people like enjoy that, but sometimes I'll make it a joke. Like today, somebody at work was like, I said, how would I do? And she's like, you just have to give me a second. I'm working on something. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to give you a second. And I kind of turn it into like a joke. And then she kind of like gets a little lighter from it. So I just choose not to involve myself in that. There are a lot of people who don't get along, or, in the education field, you're basically like raising children together, right? So that can be a difficult thing. And working as an early childhood educator, I'm always working in a team, right? Because like that, they work alongside the teacher, who also work alongside like other support staff, and with parents and all that kind of stuff. And so you have to be willing to be easygoing. Sometimes you get your way, sometimes you don't get your way. look on the bright side, try and have fun with it. We're in kindergarten, like we might as well be fun, right?
Right.
So, there's no use to stress. Yeah, right. Like, I mean, it could not be for some people, but there are definitely opportunities to butt heads with people and to join in on the gossip and the negativity. But if you can make a conscious choice not to have that in your life, then your day's a lot happier, and people actually really enjoy being around people who are positive, even like if they're somebody who tends to go the route of negative. Yeah, people say to me a lot, like, oh, I was in a terrible mood when I started my break, and then I just had a little quick conversation with you, and I feel so much better now. Or if I could talk to you on a regular basis to feel better about my life, I would definitely do that. Or, it just changes the atmosphere, and who wants to be in a negative head-butting atmosphere on a regular basis? It's a lot more of an enjoyable place to be when everyone can just get along. It's easier to not get along, right? Because you want to have your way all the time, and you want things to look like the way you want them to look, and you want to have first pick at everything that you do or whatever. But there's got to be a little bit of give and take, and know that, like, there's some hills you don't want to die on. Is that what you say, right? Like, it's not
it's not worth it.
Yeah, sometimes it's just like you got to choose your battles and choose what is like really important. Like, to me, as long as you're being kind to the kids and you're like looking out for their safety, anything goes, right? So yeah, I agree with you completely, DK. There are tons and tons of opportunity. There's a lot of women working together, doing the parenting thing, and everyone thinks they've got the best ideas, but yeah, it takes a conscious effort to enjoy life, but it's a lot more fun that way.
For sure. And you mentioned how you can really light up someone's day just by spending just a 10 or 15-minute break with them, and that's really cool. Mm-hmm. I wondered if one thing that I was just curious about, Angie, with your approach in general to life, and ever since I've met you as well, is you have this natural curiosity. And I'm just curious as to there's got to be something that energizes that for you, where you find fulfillment by sharing that curiosity and sharing what you're curious about, and then enjoying what you receive back from others and what they share back with you. How did could you take us through the background of where does that stuff come from, and to me that's like a joy of life thing, right? I'm just curious as to if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, you were kind of like answering you were kind of giving my answer in the way that you were asking the question of just like it gives me energy, and it sparks like excitement to have like those deep conversations, or to like kind of like in a positive way, like push somebody to their limit of like what they're willing to share in a safe environment with someone that you can trust, So like I was saying, I'm not in it for the gossip. I'm not in it for the, I'm not in it to hear the stories and, know the excitement of that kind of thing. It's fulfilling to me when people can open up and share and be vulnerable. And then you can kind of connect and say like, hey, me too, like, you've shared something early when I met you, DK, that tonight I just said like, hey, me too, with what I was not willing to share out in public. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And so just when people are willing to open up and be vulnerable, that's like the key to connectedness, I feel like, because you don't feel like, hey, you're putting on this perfect face to the world, and then you're not very connectable in that way, because people are like, oh, I don't want to share with that person because they've got it all together and I don't, so I don't feel comfortable sharing with them. Like I always say, like when people are like, oh, you could come over, but like my house is a mess or whatever, I'm like, ooh, I love when people's houses are a mess, because then it makes me feel like I'm not the only one who can't figure this out, right? So it just makes me feel more comfortable when you have like a basket of laundry or whatever, because that makes me feel safer, because I feel like, oh, they're in that same boat in life, right?
Exactly. point of commonality, right? Yeah, it's huge for connection. It reminds me of a story that I have where I was meeting a colleague, and then we would head from one restaurant to the next, and for whatever reason, they just did not want to share a ride in their own car, right? And so it was time after time after time. I just noticed, not that I really cared. That wasn't really that important. But come to find out that the reason was that the car had lots of empty water bottles in it. Right, that was the only concern. And then once I found that out, because eventually I did end up with a ride in the car, right? I'm like, is that it? You should see my car.
Yeah, right.
And I think that provided a much deeper connection, actually.
Yeah, you see people's like front window of like what they put out to the world, and if everyone's putting out this like perfection image, then nobody feels safe with anybody, right? Because you just kind of think like, well, that DK's got himself together and Holly's got himself together, and like I couldn't possibly share with them because they won't accept me if I'm falling apart here, right? So I feel like vulnerability connects people and makes them feel safe, and it could be in all different ways. Like I don't have a whole bunch of water bottles in my car, but I do have like candy wrappers and like from my kids that open stuff from the dollar store and there's wrappers all over, or like work stuff or whatever, right?
Sure.
So it might not be exactly the same, but it just gives you that safeness of like, he's not perfect and I'm not perfect either, and that's okay. Right?
That we're actually real people, and we have a lot more in common than it might appear.
Yeah. It just makes
that word safety, like that, boy, that's powerful. Because when we talk about how we win and lose trust, a lot of that is, do I feel safe with you? And get rid of the facade of perfection. One of a conference I was speaking at, there was a woman who was like the CFO, like the number 2 of a major corporation. And she's doing her talk, and she puts up a picture of her son in her PowerPoint. And she said, so, I get really busy sometimes, and it was school picture day at the school. And she's like, yep, I completely spaced. And she puts up of her son. He is a mess, like his hair is everywhere. He's like got the raggedy t-shirt. And it was just this moment, like afterwards, and I call it the ladies' room chatter. Like, what do people remember and talk about in the ladies' room? Everybody was like, oh my God, school picture day. That was so great. Mm-hmm. And you would think, the CFO to admit to that, but that's what people remembered. And it's exactly that. She became more human. Yes. And you almost trusted her more as a CFO because she's willing to say, yep, school picture day, completely spaced. My son was a mess.
She's more relatable, right? Like you said, she's
more like relatable, exactly.
Right? And for her to put that out there, that to me is like bold, and you don't want to be perfect. People don't feel comfortable around you when you're perfect, right? So I never aim for perfect. That's not worth it. You're not winning anything over from anyone, not yourself or anybody else. So
your version of perfect, my version of pivot. It's just
So perfect doesn't sit well with me.
No such thing as true perfection, right? Yeah. I wanted to also share some comments because we have a couple of people actually on tonight. And actually, I wanted to introduce Lori Ann Campbell, who has a podcast of her own called Lift Your Story. So she actually, you both might be interested in being a guest in her podcast as well at some point. And she is very much a fan of relationship building. And as far as the bottles in the car, it sounds like she's glad that they weren't wine bottles. And I'm glad as well.
You might not have felt as comfortable, DK, if it was.
Yeah, I would be like, well, that is a lot of, you're right. Even the little ones I'd have trouble with, right? Even if there's like 20 of those little tiny wine bottles. Nope. For the record, it was water, right? Completely pro. The individual was actually in the sales role, so those are good for the road, right, so to speak. But anyway, now what really impresses me about your approach, Angie, is that you're waiting. You're not just doing this one-on-one, right, with a connection thing. You're actually going into a group of 15 or 20 people that you've never even met, and you're asking very inquisitive and deep. You're making these deep connections like almost like instantly. It's really quite amazing.
Well, thank you.
I would second that.
Yeah, I've learned in the last little while I'm becoming a lot more confident in myself because I never would have done that before. And so I appreciate both of you saying that because it does mean a lot to me. Every week when we get off the phone, I just think back on all the positive things that you guys say, and they mean the world to me because that helps to build that confidence to be able to speak in front of people. And yeah, it feels good. It feels good to ask questions and people feel safe enough to give some real answers. And I don't even know where it comes from. I think the more I practice, the better I get. And that's what I feel like it's like the goal in life all of the time. I tell my kids that in anything you do in life, the more you practice, the better you get. And that's what's happening, I guess.
Isn't that cool?
Take action. Because in our last conversation, I kind of challenged Angie, and one of my things is, what are you really good at? And I said, ask your friends. And she did. And it was amazing, the responses you got.
Mm-hmm. Or when you said, what is it that you're really, looking for? So when I was kind of I'm at a crossroad, I don't really know where to go. I have some decisions to make. And when you said, what is it that you're really looking for? And I was
what are the skills? What are the skills you feel like you're missing that you want to learn?
Yeah. And where are you trying to go with this stuff or whatever? And I was kind of I'm got all this stuff. This is where the marinating comes in, right? Because I got all this stuff here and whatever. And I'm what am I trying to do? I don't even know. Right. And so to just kind of sit and let it soak in and realize what is it that you're hoping to do, or what are the skills that you're hoping to share or learn or growth that you're looking for. And so I hadn't even thought about that. So it's kind of cool to be with different people who do challenge you a little bit and kind of ask questions. And DK gave a great list of questions that I've gone over 3 or 4 times this week and just kind of thought about them. And before I even read the one that said which one resonated with you or which questions resonated with you, I already was ooh, this one pulls at me. I'm excited about this one, right? And so,
awesome.
And then there were some that I was oh, this one doesn't mean anything to me at all, right? And so it's just really cool to be around people who challenge you a little bit and kind of make you peel back layers of an onion and kind of go deeper and think about things you might not have thought about before.
100%, right?
Yeah,
it's the willingness to step forward.
The power of asking questions. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got was give less advice, ask better questions. And I would say to both DK and Angie, you guys ask amazing questions. Yes, give less advice, ask better questions. Because deep down, deep down, do we really want advice? Am I really saying, tell me what to do? And most of the time, we kind of know internally. But when people ask us questions, we kind of come to it ourselves. I think we're much more likely to act on it. Yeah. But DK's list. I hope DK. Yeah, but I hope DK you'll share your list at some point with the group, because DK had 9 questions that were just wow, really made you think. And yeah, some were over here and some were over there. It was. I hope you publish that. That's really a really cool list of questions.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate that, Holly. And I wonder, Angie, if you'd be willing to share, was there one, and you could change it up to whatever you like, but was there one that resonated the most out of?
Yeah, there definitely was. Let's see, because I was trying to look for the list of them. It was number 6 that resonated with me the most. Number 6 and number 7. So I don't know if either one of you guys have the list of questions there, because I wish I had it. It was talking about asking people deep and challenging questions. So I appreciate being asked those, because I feel like that's where more growth happens. And I agree with you completely, Holly, because you could tell me what to do, but that's kind of like I always think when you ask a child or a person a question and then somebody else answers, then I always say to my kindergarten students, you've stopped their thinking, right? Because you just gave them the answer, so then now they don't have to think. But when you ask a deep question, then they are doing that internal work. They'll come to those answers on their own. They know better than you know, right? What the answer is. They just might not have come to it yet. So the question that you asked was question number 6, and I have so many emails here that I'm not finding the list right now.
I've got it here if you want me to read them off.
Yeah. If you want to read number 6 for sure, is number 6 and number 7. I know were ones that stood out to me.
Yeah, I'll read them both.
Okay.
Number 6 was, how do you feel when encouraging others to share and exploring the depths of their stories?
Yeah, that was the one that I was like, ooh, that's what I want to do. That's what I like. That speaks to me. So the depth of their stories, that's just like really good information. It's like the meat and potatoes right there, right? Is like depth of their stories. I like that.
Yeah, and then the depth of connection that results once you have that sharing at that level, right? Because likely you're going to share a deep story with them as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other question actually is just so happens is the subject of our podcast today, right? What do you enjoy more, the destinations you reach or the roads you take to get there?
Yeah. And it's funny because the first thing I thought was that the roads you take to get there. I enjoy the roads more than the destination. But then it's funny because you remember how I was just saying that person said to marinate, that I'm in the marinating process. And here I am trying to rush to find the answers when I'm saying that I like the process better than the product, right? And so the journey better than the destination. Unless it's like Mexico or Hawaii, then I think I might enjoy the destination.
That is your choice, right?
Yeah.
True. I've never been to Hawaii, but I do love going to Mexico on occasion. And now I have to admit, it kind of, like all places, it depends on where.
Yes.
At either place, I'm sure. Although I think it'd be a lot harder to find a bad place in Hawaii, perhaps.
Yes, I have had the joy of going to Hawaii once, and it was a treat in itself. So,
on my list for sure.
Yeah. So, Holly, did you have one of those questions that spoke to you? You were saying something about liking question number 8.
I did, yeah, and it was number 8. But I will say on the is it the road or the, it is the road. Like, to me, that's it all. It's a road. Even when you roll over and flip over in a ditch, and you crawl back out and stick out your thumb and hitchhike. It's still it is the road for me. It's all about the road. Yeah. But yeah, so it was number 8. It was something about DK was number 8. It was something about having to dig to uncover the truth of something. Can you read number 8?
Yeah. Number 8, as it was written, do you have a recent experience where you had to explore, dig, or inquire to find the truth about something?
Yes, because that is a core tenet of the Aikido. Is your job is to take off the boxing gloves and put on your detective hat. In every conflict, I make it a point to learn something about the other person, and a big part of that is there a misunderstanding? Have I assigned a motivation to you that you don't have? A very specific example is I purposefully gone out and started having political conversations with people I disagree with. And I never in a million years would have done that. But I'm looking for ways to challenge myself, to say, can I not get triggered? Can I stay calm? And can I put on my detective hat? And it's been fascinating because the 3 questions I ask are high level. Like, we're not going to get into specific politicians, but high level. What are the policies that are most important to you? And how do they affect you personally? What's worrying you the most? And how does it affect you personally? And what do people get wrong about you? Right? If they label you a Democrat, a Republican, a conservative, or progressive, what do people get wrong about you? And that question has led to just amazing answers. So, DK, that question, I'm like, yes, if you can do the work to listen, to not get triggered, and to discover the truth, because there's so much unnecessary suffering. Like, there's so much conflict is based on stuff that just isn't true. We're reacting to our reaction, right? We get triggered and we tell a story. in our head.
Mm-hmm.
And that story may or may not be true. And if you have the courage to go out there and just say, hey, this is the story I'm telling in my head. Brene Brown talks about this.
I was just thinking that too. In the lake with her husband.
You may.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like Steve. Just like Steve. You know, I tell the story, and then Steve tells the story, and they were completely reacting to things that completely weren't true. So I love that question, DK.
Mm-hmm.
That is so huge, and that puts a whole different light on the whole idea of conflict, right? Because there's likely something they're getting wrong about you, or that you're getting wrong about them, or maybe probably a little bit of both, right? And so the deeper that discovery can take, and I actually have, I think, fairly good listening skills, but it's all about getting over the trigger, getting over what appears to be an offense, and getting out of your head, right, and into your heart, and realizing, okay, there's a connect, like Angie's talking about, there's a connection to be made here, and I don't have to lose to win.
Exactly. We can both.
Yeah, so huge. Yeah, so huge. Well, we could probably keep on for a lot longer, so I want to save some of our conversation for the next Center of Calmness episode. But I would like to just highlight some contact information for anyone interested in verbal Aikido, right? Coming alongside and finding ways to win with the same amount of energy, but with so much more power and effectiveness, with Holly Buchanan at holly@hollybuchanan.com, for those of us that are or those out there who are just listening on audio in the future. And then I also wanted to highlight as well Angie Grierson at Angie Grierson, that's Angie, A-N-G-I-E, Grierson, Grierson, at hotmail.com. I know, a little bit older domain, but don't worry. it'll reach her.
My highlight is
no judgment.
Technology
right?
is not my thing. Simplicity.
Simplicity, right? Hotmail.com. Very, very simple. Right. Everybody knows hotmail.com, right?
That's
so
right.
It's very memorable. And folks, reach out to Angie for a deep connection, right? For a great conversation. She'll ask you very inquisitive questions, and you'll come away with a friend for life, I am sure. Plus, as she was sharing with Holly and myself, tons of solutions for enhancing happiness, right? So everybody wants to be happy. I think, was it John Lennon that said that? Anyway, it's a goal of us all, as much as we might not want to admit it. With all the goals and objectives we have in front of us, the true end goal of life is simply to be happy. So let's just do that. Enjoy great connections, a little verbal Aikido, a little bit of listening, lots of connection, and we'll all be back at another Center of Calmness very soon.
Thanks for having us, DK. It was great.
Thanks for joining me, both Holly and Angie. Really appreciate it. Until next time.
Namaste.
Namaste.